Hi, so being a teacher, I thought today I would talk about the GCSEs, which are the qualifications taken by 16-year-olds in England and Wales. The results came out end of last week, and we get the same thing every year in the newspaper. Oh, results have gone up again. How fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Especially with this time, there's been a change in the grading system. It's supposed to have made it more rigorous. In some ways it has. But the problem is that when you read about these things in the media, it's quite clear that the journalists writing these pieces have no idea how it works. They just go by the Department for Education press releases. And it's always quite cunning the way it's done as well, because it's almost like, well, where would they get the information from, really? Because it looks good on the government if the results have gone up. Oh, aren't we doing a fantastic job of education? And then, oh, it's down to the hard work of our teachers and students. That way, it allows the government to get back onto speaking terms with both staff and students who have been sick about yet another year of massive underfunding within the area. And of course, teachers aren't going to turn around and say, no, it's not due to our hard work, it's a load of rubbish. But here's how it sort of works throughout my sort of 20-year teaching career. So this has always been the case, by the way. Oh, results have gone up, must be getting easier. And they go, no, it's not getting easier, must be getting easier, not getting easier. And there are a few aspects to it. The first one is, to begin with, when I started teaching, my first boss showed me something. Now, it was quite apparent that the exams weren't getting easier year by year. The same standard was there, the same standard of questions. But what you could quite clearly see was that the percentage score needed to get certain grades was going down. Because here's how it works. You would think when you're setting an exam board sets an exam, they write the exam, and then they say, okay, to get this grade, you need this many points, this grade. And the old grading system was letter. It went from a grade G, which is the lowest grade, up to to begin with, up to an A. I was in one of the first years to do GCSEs. It replaced something called O levels, ordinary levels. And basically GCSEs had a load of stuff taken out of it. So they were certainly not more rigorous. They were massively dumbed down. When I went to do my A levels after my GCSEs, which is the qualification to do before going to university, I was told in no uncertain terms by my teacher, because GCSEs was quite a recent thing, there's a load of stuff that ordinarily you would have learnt by now and you haven't learnt. So there's going to be this gap. So you're going to have to do a lot more work for your A level than would have been the case a few years ago. Obviously, A levels are hard work anyway, but still. So what was happening is the grades needed going down. And the reason is because they don't say, oh, to get a grade A, you need this score. To get a grade B, you need this score, and so on. They work all that out after they've all been marked, The grade boundaries, it's basically a huge fiddle. And that's not to say that they're looking for, oh, we're looking for a pass rate of this much this year. Let's work out the scores to do it. But there's some massaging of it, with the results that the percentage needed for the same qualification year on year can be not massively different. It's not going to be like 10% one year and 50% the next year, but it varies significantly. And as I say, it used to go up to a grade A, and then they had the top grade of an A star. And the reason for that is because the percentage needed to get an A, because they've been going down over all these years, had got to such a low point. For some subject, I've seen some subjects where to get an A, you didn't even need 50%. So you could get half the exam wrong and still get what was the top grade, which is an absolute madness. So they introduced the A star. But even the A star wasn't as high as the A used to be. You still don't need anywhere near, that score. And what people think of this latest scoring system, so they've changed it to a number system now. So now, instead of an A star being the top grade, a 9 is the top grade, it goes down to 1. So it's actually created an extra grade, as 9 as opposed to 8 grades. And it goes 1 being the worst, but still passing up to a 9. And a 4 is classed as a decent pass. Because even before, although it went down to G, you needed a C to be classed as a decent pass. And now it's a 4. And they don't always translate exactly, but the 4 is supposed to be round about the low C area in terms of old money. And a lot of, they've been told, oh, it's a lot more rigorous now, a lot more rigorous. And it sort of is, actually. To get the top grade now, a 9, is more difficult. But again, don't be thinking in terms of, oh, you must need to get like 80 or 90% to do that. No, you don't. But you do need to get a good score. It is still a good achievement to get a 9. The other thing I will say, because it's not all just a complete fiddle, because at this point you might be thinking, oh, does that mean that educational standards haven't risen at all? It's not quite true, no. There has certainly been a change. If I compare the way students, when I was doing my GCSEs and the way they are now, the more serious students are even more serious now. And they do a lot of work. And also the way they're prepared is much better. In my day, when I was at school, even my good teachers, they taught you very well the concepts, the subject. You got a lot of what I would call education. That was always excellent. But you didn't really get a lot of skills in there in terms of dealing with exams. No one told me, for example, how to revise. Revising for me was just flicking through your notes. That's no good at all. Now you are taught actual revision techniques. It's, when I teaching students for exam-based subjects where they've got an external exam, in a lesson I don't just cover the material that's needed. You also cover exam technique. And also revision technique, and they're very, and these are things that weren't covered at all when I was at school, and it has come in. So students are a lot better now at learning than they used to be, and quite a lot of them are a lot more serious as well. But of course, not everyone. There are plenty of students that are not that serious about it. And if truth be told, if we're talking about the students who are really serious and do a lot of work, and their parents are really good as well and encourage them and provide them with that ambition, that motivation, those are not the students who are getting the 4s. When we're talking about the good pass rate has increased again, we're talking about people getting 4s. Now, at that level, there are some people who very genuinely work very hard and they find a subject extremely difficult, but just through sheer grit and hard work, they get a 4, and that's a good result for them. Fair play. But for a lot of students, a 4 isn't a great result. If they've been working their very best on it, still having a life, but working their best on it, a lot of those students, even if they find a subject challenging, will still get something like a 6. Because that's the difference a lot of hard work can make. I've known, I was looking at some results from GCSE physics. I didn't teach them for their exam year, but I taught them in their year 10 year. And there were people who got, decent grades, and they found the subject difficult, but they tried. They really worked hard, and they were a credit to themselves and their parents, and indeed the college in the end. And so, yeah, you're talking a lot about students who are not that serious about it. They're not completely willfully refusing to do anything, because then they would struggle to get a 4. But nonetheless, you're not talking about the hardest workers or the most serious students or the most organised of students. And so they say that the exams have got a lot more rigorous. And as I say, at the upper end, I think it's definitely true. For example, GCSE physics used to be the case that a lot of the calculations, the equations would be given to you. All you had to do was to select the correct equation. Sometimes you might have to rearrange it and basically get a number out of it. Now you have to remember far more of them. There are very, very few equations that will be given to you in the exam. A lot of them, most of them, you have to have memorised. You have to have learnt. That naturally makes it much more difficult. But again, those are for the marks that the people getting the 6s or 7s and above are needed to be getting, not necessarily the ones at the 4s. Some more fundamental concepts of which that would have been the same before still need to be there. So then you look at it as well. And again, it's difficult to compare percentages when the exam is fundamentally different. The curriculum changed a little bit, but the same core concepts are in there. But yeah, the fundamental way the exams was done is a little bit different. But nonetheless, to get a grade C on physics, say last year when it was under the old system, there are 2 different tiers as well. You've got higher tier, you've got foundation tier. But nonetheless, you needed a much lower percentage, even on foundation, where you'd need the highest percentage because a 4 represents a much higher grade on that system, and you've got easier questions, was way less. It was about 48% last year, and this year it's about 60%. So it's a significantly lower percentage needed to get that. Albeit, some will say, oh, but it's a bit more rigorous. Is it that much more rigorous? You know, is it 25% more rigorous? At that level, at the level 4 level, no, it's not. It's not. So again, you know, part of it is this massaging of it. And then there's another thing as well. So they already have a system where they will massage the grade boundaries. And they also talk, in terms of the scores, they talk in terms of what's called UMS, which is not the actual scores in the papers as well. Because there's another level of massaging of the figures there as well to make sure they do. And the argument for it is, well, let's say one year we just accidentally set a really hard paper, or there's a particular question that causes a load of trouble. We don't want to disadvantage this year's students. But ultimately, the end result is that it means that they keep it roughly the same, but with a slight increase is inevitably how it usually ends up going. And I'm not saying if there was a 1 year, where everyone actually genuinely did terribly, okay, that would... But then that would also trigger what has happened this year, which is some emergency action to rectify it. So I'm just going to show you something here. For science, as well as doing individual science or something, you can do what's called combined science, which is a bit of physics, chemistry, and biology, but you get 2 grades for it. It's similar to what I did when I was doing GCSEs. We did what's called double award. So you get 2 grades for this, but because it's 2 GCSEs, it's not always 2 of the same grade. So you could be U unclassified, or you could get a 1 and a 1, or a 2 and a 1, 2 and a 2, 3 and a 2. And it works up like this. It's sort of showing you there, the very top you could get is a double 9, the bottom you could get is a double 1. So what's supposed to be that good pass, because a good pass is a 4, is a double 4. And that's how it was intended. But because the results for this were so bad, and it was, you know, there weren't enough people getting a double 4, what they did is they changed it so that a good pass now for this, just specifically for this, is classified as a 4-3. Which not only is superbly confusing for employers, because that was my initial reaction to all this. It was like, well, if you want to change the spec and you want to make the exams more rigorous, you can do that. That doesn't justify a change in the grading system. There's no need for that. Unless what happens ultimately in a change in the grading system is you just basically end up confusing a whole load of people who need to know what it's about, including employers. It's super important that employers know what things are equivalent to, and they would go by this and go, oh, 4's like a C then, is it? So then they've reduced it down. But that would be really confusing to a lot of people. You know, educational centres can keep up on board with this, because we'll get our information directly from the Department for Education, and we now know that, oh, right, so that's now classed as a good thing. But we also know that the reason for that is because they've completely cocked it up, as they always do whenever they make any significant changes like this, because it's not done in consultation with teachers. They will say it is. I mean, in fair enough, they do consult with us and then completely ignore what we say. So it's not really done in partnership with teachers. And you would think all education matters should really be decided by practicing teachers, not people who were a teacher for like 5 years and then got out and went and often became a consultant, and they are the ones now informing government policy, as well as extremely poorly educated education ministers themselves, as the one who came up with this mad scheme. But there we go. So just to try and make a little bit of sense out of it, you know, with the reason the grades rise each time, it's not measured on common posts from year to year. Figures are massaged. It's not to knock down, as I say, the students for their tremendous hard work, because students are more, the good students are better than they were in my day. There's definitely been an improvement in standards there, because, as I say, we don't just focus as teachers on delivering the course material, which was always there. And as I say, that's the education side of it, but we also teach a much broader range of skills to help those students to learn, which is useful later in life as well, especially when they go to university. So I think a lot of the more serious students are definitely better equipped for that independent study, in a way that I wasn't, because I wasn't taught any of those skills. But at the same time, at the level we're talking about, when we're talking about an increase in grades, at the level 4 area. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about, as I say, there are some serious students there, but the majority are not. The majority are just students who are decent enough students there, but they're not particularly interested in academia, and they do well enough in class and they try hard in school, but they're not going to do an awful lot outside of that. They're not going to put a lot of extra effort into it. And at that level, you know, looking at the sort of questions, looking at the exams, it's not actually that more rigorous at that level. It's a little bit, but then it's a significantly lower percentage that has been needed to get that equivalent grade this year. And as I say, it is really because it's all a statistical fiddle. That's all it is every time, every year. So anyway, hopefully that's cleared a few things up for anyone who's interested. I had to talk about that one as a teacher. I couldn't really let that one pass, could I? But thanks for watching. If you made it this far, if you've enjoyed it, then don't forget to click the like button there. And until next time, when I think of something else to ramble about, I'll see you later.